Story time about how I found out that my coworker was cheating on her husband with my boyfriend. So a little background information. From 2022 to 2023, I worked as a receptionist at this hotel, and I was pretty good friends with one of my coworkers who was kind of older than me. I was 19, and at the time she was about 28 years old, and we're gonna call her Jamie. Jamie seemed like a very professional woman. Like, she would hardly get into drama, and everybody loved her at work. And we were all super thankful to have her because she was also a really good worker. Now, Jamie was married and she had a son who was about 3 years old. And she would always brag about how her husband treated her so well, which was weird because, girl, if he treated you well, why did you cheat on him? Be so for real. Anyway, so there was this guy who was working in the dining room area and he was extremely fine. Like, when I tell you every girl wanted to get with him, every girl wanted to get with him. But somehow him and I clicked almost instantly. Fast forward a month, him and I start talking to each other. He even introduced me to his family, like for part 2. Part 2 about how my coworker cheated on her husband with my boyfriend. Anyways, like I said, we started talking and he introduced me to his friends, his family, and we would hang out constantly. And things got pretty serious. Eventually, we only were exclusively talking to each other. Fast forward about 3 months later, the news got around about him and I vividly remember that some of the girls were annoyed that him and I were together, which is understandable because he was hot AF. But the person who was most mad was Jamie, and it was very obvious. She constantly made comments towards me about us. She would be like, oh, you two shouldn't be hanging around each other, you guys aren't gonna look professional, all the girls are gonna spread rumors. Like, girl, bye, you're 28 years old with a kid and a husband, get a fucking life. And then whenever him and I would sit together at lunch, she would look at us with these nasty looks. Well, fast forward, the one night him and I are hanging out, and then eventually she follows him on all social medias. But I didn't care though because I thought he was loyal. After my boyfriend accepts it, not even 3 seconds later, she DMs him saying, hey, with a bunch of Y's, like for part 3. Part 3 about how my coworker cheated on her husband with my boyfriend. So like I said, she DMs him not even like 2 seconds later saying, hey, with a bunch of Y's, and we all know what that means. It's flirty. But she didn't answer him, so she kept spamming him. So fast forward, after him and I were dating for 7 months, we started growing apart. Like, we would spend hours without talking to each other. We stopped going out to the point where it was causing huge fights. And then a week later, a rumor starts going around that he and my coworker Jamie slept together. I found this hard to believe because I feel like people were just trying to break us up. But unfortunately, these rumors were true because I did receive some pictures of evidence of it actually happening. So obviously this caused me to get into a fight with them because I confronted them about it. And fast forward, in the end, both of them were fired and they aren't together anymore, which isn't a surprise. And I don't know what's going on with her and her husband, but whenever he found out, he stormed into the hotel and made a huge scene, as anyone probably would. And now they're both banned from even entering the hotel. Story time about how my boyfriend took me back after I cheated. So a little background information, I was 16 and in 11th grade, and my boyfriend Jacob and I had just gotten back together. We'd been together for a year, but we were having some issues, so we broke up for a little bit. Well, only after a week of him and I being back together, I cheated on him. I started texting this guy and I ended up sending nudes to him, and he sent them to my boyfriend, of course. Yeah, I know, that's what I get for cheating. I'm a terrible person, blah, 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 get over it. Well, when my boyfriend confronted me about it, I told him the truth about it and he broke up with me. And I regretted it so much. A month later, I decided to reach out to him. I was like, hey, that was the worst mistake I've ever made and I want to try again. Thankfully for me, he took me back. But the first few months of us being back together were miserable. People were starting rumors that I was cheating on him again. It was literal hell. Moral of the story, if you want to get with somebody else, just break up with your partner. So if you want to get back with them, things are a little bit salvageable. Story time about how my best friend punched me in the face just to impress a group of boys. A little background information. My best friend did not have a lot of experience with boys. Once she did start talking to boys, this girl did a personality switch as soon as a boy walked into a room. She would usually just act a little bit more of like a pick-me, but never like make fun of me in front of the boys. Well, the one night her and I, we went to this party. Her and I liked the same guy, which is always a recipe for disaster. But to make sure that there were no issues, we both decided that whoever he liked would get him. Majority of the night, he ends up talking to me. And I didn't really think that there was a problem because she seemed like she was fine with it. Until a little bit later, I hear her screaming, I want to fight someone. She's like, Brad, do you know that she can't fight? He's like, oh, you can't fight? And he goes, I think you two should fight right now. So then I'm like, I'm not doing this. And she goes, no, I think Brad's right. I think we should fight. So then I'm like, okay, well, you can have fun fighting somebody else because I'm leaving. She runs outside, grabs me by my hair, and punches me in the face. and just literally actually just beats the shit out of me. I did end up pressing charges on her, but moral of the story, don't be best friends with girls who don't know how to act around men. Story time about how I got catfished by my ex-boyfriend. So a little background information, I was 16 years old and I was in 10th grade. And I had been dating this guy who we're going to call Jack since my freshman year in high school. Now the first year of our relationship was absolutely amazing, no complaints. But then fast forward, we get into 10th grade and all of a sudden he changes. Now Jake had always been a super nice person, but for some reason this year he decided that he wanted to be extra friendly to people, mainly girls. I didn't really think anything of it at the time because he told me he wanted to change up his characteristics, whatever the fuck that means. But the one day I'm in the library and then my friend Chloe walks in and she shows me a video of him rubbing some girl's thigh. And then when I confronted him about it, he was like, babe, she was forcing me to. I promise it'll never happen again. Well, I believed him. But because of this, I started paying way more attention to his actions. I realized he started going out way more and he would always have his location off. And when I confront him about it, he absolutely flips out on me, like for part 2. Part 2 about how I got catfished by my ex-boyfriend. So like I said, after I confront him about this, he decides that he's going to flip out on me, victimize himself, of course. So him and I end up breaking up, and then 5 months later, I meet this really cute guy on Snapchat. And you know, him and I are talking for a while, and of course I start to catch feelings. And then bam, him and I start dating. Now, I'm not even going to beat around the bush with this one. I was willing to date anybody because I was lonely. The next day, whenever I go to school, Jake keeps smiling at me and tries to talk to me, but I'm ignoring him because what the fuck? Well, over the next 2 days, my new boyfriend starts acting like a total jerk. He starts asking me for nudes 24/7. He never wanted to talk to me. Well, the one day him and I were having a really good day and I decided to send them to him. And then a week later, Jack walks up to me and shows me my pictures. And he's like, if you don't do the nasty with me, I'm posting these everywhere. Now, my parents are super strict and I didn't want them seeing it, so I did it with him. And he ended up posting them everywhere and then telling everybody that we did the nasty. Story time. Is blood really thicker than water? Metaphorically speaking, of course. So a little background information. I was 16 years old and I was in 10th grade. And I had just started dating this guy that my friends introduced me to. He was extremely attractive, really smart, and really kind. Literally had all the traits a girl could want in a boyfriend. So him and I are talking for a while and then we start dating and we were amazing together. And my sister had just came back home from teaching in Thailand. Surprisingly, her and I got super close because we always used to fight with each other. And now we were inseparable. The only issue was she was 25 years old acting like a child. She always wanted to be at my boyfriend's house with him and his family. Weird, I know. Anyway, so she was always over there with them and I thought that maybe she was just lonely. Wrong, of course. Now, of course, like any other relationship, mine wasn't perfect, but my boyfriend and I started having more problems than usual when my sister showed up. He was being super weird and all the signs pointed to him cheating on me, like for part 2. Part 3, is blood thicker than water? Metaphorically speaking, of course. So like I said, I forgave my sister and then I got a new guy. He was amazing. And then my sister started begging to hang out with us. Now, of course, you would have thought that I learned from the first time, but I did not. I just completely ignored the signs that God gave me that she was a bad person. Okay, I guess not a bad person. She just didn't give a fuck about my feelings. Well, the one weekend his parents went away and they needed him to house sit, so he invited me over to house sit with him. And then guess who tags along? My sister. I mean, I guess I could have told her that she couldn't come, but at the same time, I was trying to be a forgiving person, okay? And I thought that she wouldn't do this shit to me again. Well, I was wrong because on the last night of house sitting, we all decided that we were gonna get drunk. And my sister made sure that I got more effed up than everybody else. I ended up actually getting alcohol poisoning and I almost died. But she didn't care. She was too focused on sleeping with the new guy. The worst part of this is they started dating and my mom was on her side. It's been 3 years and I'm still trying to forgive her and my story time about the worst day of my life. So a little background information. I was 16 at the time, and I was either in 8th grade or 9th grade, but I really don't remember. And I had this boyfriend who we are going to call Cameron. We had been dating for 3 years, but before him and I got together, we were best friends. Well, I also was in a friend group with myself, Amber, and this girl named Sky. Now, I wouldn't really call Sky a pick-me girl. She was more of the jealous best friend. For example, the one day we went shopping for dresses, and I picked this one out that I really liked and that looked super good on me. Amber was like, OMG, you look so beautiful. And then Sky, she was like, that dress is ugly and it makes you look fat. Well, after that, I told her I didn't care what she said and that I was going to get the dress anyways. Well, she didn't like the fact that I wasn't going to listen to her, so she didn't talk to me for 2 whole weeks. And then after, she texted me saying that she forgives me, even though I didn't apologize, but okay. Well then, me being stupid, I introduced her to my boyfriend. Bad idea, like for part 2. Part 2 about the worst day of my life. So like I said, me being stupid, I introduced her to my boyfriend. Well, after that, Cameron started acting really weird. Like him and I, we would literally hang out with each other 24/7. And now he was always too busy for me and we would only talk at school. And because I was in all the smart classes and stuff, I would go over to his house to tutor him. Because, I was like the one who was winning every single fucking award for being smart. Well, I came over on the day that I would usually tutor him. And when I went over there, his mom was like, oh, he's busy. He's out with his friends. So then I went home and I got bored and I opened Instagram. Well, I see that he's at a party with Sky and they didn't even invite me. So I asked him about it, and he said, oh, it was her and her boyfriend's party. So I was like, that wasn't really an excuse for why you didn't invite me. So he apologized and I forgave him. Well, 5 weeks later, I found out that him and her did the nasty, and she got pregnant. And then there was a rumor going around that they made out in the bathroom. So I blocked both of them and never saw them again. Storytime about how my husband accidentally told me that he was cheating on me. So just some background information. My husband and I got engaged 2 years ago. And this whole situation happened a month after we got married. So fast forward, it's a Sunday morning. Well, usually every week on Sunday, I clean the whole house. So I woke up, went into the bathroom to take my ring off, and I could not get it off. Mind you, I had gained a little bit of weight since my husband and I got engaged. Anyways, I tried butter, I tried soap, I tried everything, even oil. So after trying to get it off for an hour straight, my finger was 3 times bigger than it usually is. So at this point, I'm really scared that I'm going to have to get it cut off. Because 1, I didn't want to ruin it. And 2, it was really expensive. So I call my husband and he's like, oh, call your dad. Firefighters always know what to do. So I called my dad and thank God he lived 5 minutes away because he drove over really quickly. Like for part 2. Storytime about why my mom kicked me out when I was 16. So a little background information. This had all started as soon as my dad left my mom and I. I was like 13 around the time. Well, ever since then, my mom would have different guys in and out of the house all the time. Like, we were lucky if a month went by and she was still with the same dude. Which, I mean, I kind of get it because my dad did leave us for a woman that he had started another family with. But at the same time, it was just a whole mess. Anyway, so she had got with this new guy and we're gonna call him Tyler. And by the way, the dudes that she would date, they would literally live at our house. Anyway, so a week after he moved in, I started getting really close to him, which usually never happens. Usually I would try to keep my distance because I knew how wrong it was of her having all these different guys in the house when I'm only 16. Anyways, every time that my mom would go to work, he would invite me to go see a movie and he would just be really flirty with me. And he was only 6 years older than me. And my mom was 32. You do the math. Anyways, like for part 2. Part 2 about why my mom kicked me out when I was 16. So like I said, the guy was being super flirty with me, inviting me to the movies when my mom wasn't home and all that stuff. Well, then it led to more than just that. By the way, this guy did not have a job, so he was home with me 24/7. And I was doing online school. So we were in the house by ourselves, 12 hours a day, 5 days a week. Anyways, like I said, it led to more and we started doing the nasty and stuff. Ew, just, yeah. Well, the one day after we got done doing the nasty in my mom's room, we had fell asleep. And yes, we did not have clothes on. Well, at 2 in the morning, I hear someone pounding on the bedroom door. And my mom worked night shifts. So we get up, he hurries up and gets dressed and tells me to hide under the bed. And he opens the door and it's my mom's sister. My sister literally lived in the apartment next door. And she was like, oh yeah, neither of you were answering the phone. So she wanted me to check on you guys. Like, where's Elena? And I'm still under the bed naked, like for part 3. Part 3 about why my mom kicked me out when I was 16. So like I said, I'm laying under the bed, no clothes on. She asks where I am. And he's like, oh, she should be in her room. So he goes looking for me everywhere. With her. And he's like, oh, well, maybe she's outside on the patio. And I don't know why the hell my mom's sister had a key to our apartment anyways. But she's still looking for me in the apartment and she looks under the fucking bed. And at first she's like, oh my god, what did he do to you? And I'm trying to tell her nothing, like I made that decision on my own. So she calls my mom right away. My mom comes home. She's screaming at me and she kicks me out. So I go to my grandma's house. And I told my grandma what happened. And my grandma calls her. And she's like, it's not her fault that you gave her daddy issues. And I'm like, bruh, what the fuck? Child, anyways. So then she goes on Facebook and starts posting about how I'm a whore and a slut and how, like, it isn't her boyfriend's fault at all. So now Storytime about how I found my uncle sleeping with my best friend. So a little background information. I was 18 at the time and a freshman in college. My uncle was a National Guard, and we were the same age, we went to the same school, and we also had the same friends. And while he was away, I had made one friend that he didn't know about. Her and I became best friends, we got into the same college, and we were in the same dorm room together. Well, the one day my uncle came to my college to surprise me. I ran up to him, I gave him a big hug, and my best friend was super confused because I had never introduced them. And when I introduced them, there was this weird, awkward vibe. So all three of us went back to the dorm room, and I asked her if it was okay that he spent the night, because I didn't want to be that person to just invade her space. So she ended up saying yes, and eventually we all got really hungry, and we all wanted Chick-fil-A, so I went and I left them all alone in the room together. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how I found my uncle sleeping with my best friend. So like I said, I went to go get us Chick-fil-A and I left them in the dorm all alone together. While I was waiting in line, I called them to ask what they wanted and nobody answered the phone. So I was like, okay, whatever, it's fine. They're probably just busy talking. So I low-key took a long time because I went to the grocery store to get some cookies. I was just craving them. So then I get back to the dorm room. As soon as I open the door, I see both of them unclothed on top of each other on the bed, doing the nasty. So for some reason, I had a broom and I threw it at my uncle and I went to my friend's apartment that night. And when I told my mom about it, she said that it was my fault because weirdly enough, they praised all the boys in my family. Part 2 of how my husband accidentally told me that he was cheating on me. So like I said, my dad lived 5 minutes away, so he just rushed over to my house. And we tried a few more things to get it off. We tried Windex, we tried the dental floss, none of it was working. So my dad told me that we were gonna have to cut it off with pliers. So he comes over with the pliers, cuts the ring off. Well, a few days later, I had taken it to the same place that we got it to get the band fixed. Or replaced. While I was there, I decided to get it appraised, just for insurance reasons. So a few days later, I go and pick up my ring, and when I get home, I look at the appraisal. It was not the same one that I had picked out in the store. It looked exactly like it, but there was like a $20,000 price difference. So right now, I'm like, what the fuck? I'm not mad about the money part. I'm more mad that my husband lied to me. I was more upset about the fact that he had lied to me. So I had made dinner reservations for the next night, so that way I could hopefully bring up the conversation about it, like for part 3. Part 3 of how my husband accidentally told me that he was cheating on me. So like I said, I had made reservations for him and I to go out to dinner so that way I could hopefully spark up the conversation about it. So when we finally sat down, I had started up the conversation. I had told him that when I took my ring in to get it fixed, I also got it appraised. And his face immediately changed after that, but he wasn't saying anything. He was like, oh, okay, how did that go? So at this point, I was tired of beating around the bush, and I was like, why wouldn't you just tell me if we were having money troubles? And he was like, what do you mean? We're not having any money troubles. I'm fine. One thing about my husband is that he is very wealthy. And he takes pride in the fact that he is very wealthy. So obviously, me right there kind of questioning his wealth, he fucked up and told me the truth. He was like, well, I'm going to be honest with you. I accidentally gave the ring that I was supposed to give you to a girl I was seeing at the time. And I just never got around to replacing yours. So fast forward to present day, I am currently moving all of my stuff out of our house and filing for divorce. Story time about how my best friend started seeing my mom. So we're going to call my best friend Joey. Joey and I had been best friends since we were 4 years old, and my family was really close with his and vice versa. And she had always been really nice to him, of course because he was a family friend and he was my best friend. Well, one day I thought that she liked him a little bit more than she liked me. She would always ask the weirdest questions. Like, oh, is Joey single? Or what's Joey's sexuality? Like, sis had a whole ass husband. But at the time, I didn't think anything of it because I just thought that she really wanted him and I to date. But when he turned 15, things started getting a little bit weirder. Like, sometimes he would go over my house right after school, even when I wasn't there to hang out with my mother. And usually the only time he was at the house was whenever him and I were hanging out. Well, the one day I walked in and they were both sitting on the couch talking. And when they both saw me, they acted like nothing was wrong with it. Like for part 2 about how my best friend started seeing my mom. So like I said, the one day I come home after school and they're both sitting on the couch already talking. And they look at me and say hi as if nothing was wrong with the situation. And then after that, Joey started mentioning how my mom was so hot. And I was like, yeah, no, she's pretty, but that's it. Well, the one day my mom left for work earlier than she usually does. So I messaged my dad and asked him if he wanted to hang out. So of course he said yes, and 5 hours later I came home, and I go upstairs. And I'm just like hearing things from my mother's bedroom. So I go up and I open the door, and because I don't want this video to get taken down, you guys probably can guess what I saw. So I ran out of the room, ran downstairs, I start panicking, and Joey came and hugged me and said, "I'm sorry, me and your mom just love each other." So I told them both they were absolutely disgusting. So then my mom starts crying and begging me to forgive her, and now I live with my dad.